Hello, Peter. Hey. My name is Manny Klukaris. I'm the CEO of Augmedix. Augmedix was founded 11 years ago with the mission of relieving the documentation burden from clinicians so that they could spend more time focusing on patients rather than documenting. We've discovered that clinicians spend up to 1/3 of their day on documentation as opposed to seeing patients.
I imagine there are many clinicians who would not be surprised by that and they would feel that burden. Tell me a little bit more about the burden of medical and the importance of the medical documentation and what that's about and how you're addressing that problem.
Well, every time you see a doctor, the doctor must document that encounter. And the documentation has to follow a particular structure, format, and then it gets deposited into your specific electronic health record. It's a permanent record of all of your medical records. It sounds simple, but the actual process is very laborious, and that's why it takes up to 1/3 of a doctor's day doing that, and sometimes even more than that. So it didn't really make a lot of sense, given the acute shortage of clinicians in the United States in particular, for them to be spending so much time on an administrative task. We used the power of generative AI to relieve them of that burden and allow them to focus on patients. And as a result, they have the ability to see more patients, spend more time on the patients, focus on the patient. Our tagline is, see the patient, trust the technology. And, we do it better, faster, cheaper than when they do it themselves.
Hey, that's interesting in itself. The organization's been around for 11 years, and you're harnessing the power of generative AI. So I'm going to guess that it's been a bit of a journey in looking to use the best technology to solve this problem, but that's kind of been the consistent key. Talk to me a little bit about that and how Gen AI plays a role now.
Absolutely. Great question. So it was a journey. As you can imagine, generative AI was really not a thing 11 years ago. But what we did revolutionize and pioneer was the concept of using the ambient conversation, the natural conversation that occurs between a doctor and a patient, to serve as the input for creating a medical note, as opposed to asking the doctor to undertake a separate transaction, which is, I'm going to dictate, after I've had the encounter with the patient, what I just did into the electronic health record, or I'm going to type it in. So those are very time-consuming tasks that are added to the actual encounter itself. So we're saying, let's repurpose the encounter, the conversation that occurs during the encounter, and use that as the primary input for generating the medical note. We invented that concept 11 years ago and started building tools to make the task of creating the note from that audio file easier. And ultimately, when generative AI came along, it did a lot of the heavy lifting for us. But along the way, we learned a great deal about clinician workflows, what's important in terms of what needs to be documented in a medical note by specialty. It varies greatly across specialties. And to basically make sure that the note itself is organized in such a fashion that it makes review by the clinician, has to ultimately sign off on the note, easy, fast and easy. So we deliver structured data in addition to a highly organized problem-based medical note to make that review a lot easier, and also to feed we serve mostly enterprises, large healthcare enterprises, feed their data lakes with structured information, structured data, so that they can mine that more effectively.
Yeah, you're hitting a few things there in terms of improving the efficiency within the patient encounter and hopefully improving the patient experience as well, if that allows for the clinician to be more present with the patient at the time rather than having their head in a computer or dictating something afterwards. But also that those elements after as well, in terms of having information that's actually useful to provide some insights and essentially pick up issues for patients before they arise. And this area of utilizing generative AI or ambient technology within healthcare, it seems to make a lot of sense to me and to I imagine, people attending HIMSS as well. There's a lot of different ways to approach that problem and work with different partners. And given that you've got that breadth of experience within the industry and you've seen those workflows, like how do you go about with those discussions with, you know, the enterprises and the hospital groups and everything in deciding those partners to work with? Like, what's a bit unique in terms of working with someone like yourselves that have got that experience and kind of been through that journey?
Well, it helps that you've been around a long time.
Yeah.
People kind of know you already. And just to give you a little bit of context, we have contracted with 7 of the top 20 U.S. healthcare enterprises, 4 of the top 10. So we're pretty familiar with large enterprises. And, part of it is we've been around for a long time, but also part of it is we've been able to deliver a compelling value proposition. So it's not just unburdening clinicians for the sake of unburdening them, which is very important because of burnout. However, there's also a financial element to it, and you want to make sure that the service that you're delivering delivers value to the enterprise. And we've been able to establish a record of delivering very high ROI to our customers, and that's why roughly 70 to 80% of our growth comes from our existing customers.
Yeah, right. Servicing that existing base, it's really important. Thinking that, we've touched on a couple of times about those important elements around clinician burnout and also on the financial implications as well. I imagine regulatory is also front of mind for you too. There's a lot of increasing burden of reporting and capturing the right information and doing the right things with that data. So I imagine that's front of mind for you in terms of building the solution as well, the regulatory component.
Well, regulation is definitely coming. The ONC published HTI 1 recently this year, and it addresses clinical decision intervention, which is basically any entity that provides guidance, if you will, to clinicians in terms of decision making. So it's called intervention. We're not involved in that. We are a purveyor of information and data. And we make sure that the doctor applies their particular skills, their expertise to how to interpret and apply that particular information that we purvey. So we're not regulated by or not covered by the regulations that have just been promulgated by the government. Yes.
Yeah, interesting. And an evolving space, and there's, particularly at HIMSS this week, we've heard of a lot about emerging technology and the exciting potential for this space. What excites you about the future for the area that you're working in now, and what's coming for Augmedix? What can we look forward to seeing?
Healthcare historically has moved at a fairly slow pace in terms of adopting new technologies. I feel that is changing rapidly with the advent of generative AI and how we can apply it in unobtrusive ways to really affect operating efficiency, workflows, etc. So I think that the pace of technology adoption is accelerating, and it's going to continue to accelerate. And it's just a very easy decision, I believe, for healthcare providers to adopt products such as ours, Augmedix Go or Augmedix Live, to, first of all, relieve the burden on their clinicians, but secondly, to help improve their bottom line. So if you have those two value drivers behind a solution, you're going to get, especially today where there's such a scarcity of trained medical professions in the United States, you're going to get a pretty receptive audience. And I think that's just going to build over the next couple of years.